Hello, welcome to our new video. Today, Peter is going to share with you the cost of those cities that we talked about in our last video last week and how much we spent in each of our favorite cities and three or four more? Three extras.
Yeah. Yes. So hopefully you watched that video. It is our 8 kind of best dream locations for slow travel, places that we absolutely loved and think were a tremendous value. Not all of them were under budget, but none of them of the 8 were outrageous prices. The extra 3 were the ones that are worth the splurge. They're still great value, but they are expensive places to go. And you probably guess one of them. The other 2, I bet you don't know until you watch. But hopefully you watch that other video and enjoy this one, because I'm going to go into what we really spent versus what we had budgeted based on what we knew about those.
Okay, Peter, it's your turn. I'm gonna go away. Bye.
As we dive into the actual numbers for each of these cities, let's start with our standard budget. We have a budget per month of $4,000. Now, again, we travel all year, so we try to balance that across. We have about $500 in fixed costs. That's health insurance, life insurance, just in case, and things like Netflix and a few other minor issues. Now, we don't have a big storage units or anything like that, so our fixed costs are really small. The more stuff you keep at home, the bigger your fixed costs are going to be, the bigger your budget, or maybe the smaller the remaining travel budget is. Now, we include those in that $4,000 budget. So how do we break down that $4,000? Well, we initially started at $1,500 for housing. That's harder to do, especially when you're traveling around Europe and some of these other places. So we've raised it to $1,800 if we're in an area that needs that much more. We'll even exceed that for the right kind of place, but that's usually a splurge month. Food, we target $300 a month averaged across, $300 per week for the month. So $1,200 for the month across the entire year. Then we have kind of a fun bucket, and that's to get us into sites, to take ferry trips or boat cruises or whatever. And we only put a couple $100 in that per month. And then we do carry things over. And that's what we use our savings for. So we have a low cost month, 1 month, we can put more into the fun months. Or if we know something's coming up, we plan for that. And then we kind of have a bunch of other little buckets and clothing and cell phones and yada, yada, yada. We basically have an everything else for this video because you don't want to see all our individual numbers. But that does include like basic medical costs, not the insurance, but picking up the medicines you need, the supplements, things like that. That is our normal budget that we try to stick to. And then we adjust each month based on where we're going. We use this website called Numbeo that I will put a link into in the description, where you can go and put in a city and see what their cost is. But the best thing is you can put in a second city and compare them. And that way, if you're living in, like we did, Denver, Colorado, you can compare it to Paris or Da Nang or Tokyo and see kind of what to expect, especially in the food side. Since we travel and spend sometimes 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks in a location, what I've done with these numbers is break it into a 30-day chunk. First, since I'm counting down to align with the last video, is Kyoto. Now, we were there this past year, and Japan overall is pretty expensive, especially Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto kind of, down in Okinawa definitely, but Kyoto is not as bad. But because Kyoto and Japan are a little more expensive, we actually upped our budget for that month to $4,500. You'll spend $2,000 to $2,500 for a small apartment or house for rent on Airbnb. Hotels are generally over $100, so you're at $3,000 and up. If you use points, you can get them more in that $70, $75, $80 range, and therefore get in that $2,500 range. So you can see housing is a huge portion of it. Now, we did end up spending $4,660, which was 3% of our budget. I feel pretty good about that. We did not eat out a lot. And when we did, we generally ate some simple things like ramen and stuff to save the budget. But we did do a lot of the other activities out and about. So, going to Nara, going to Kobe, going to Osaka several times, just kind of running around the area and trying to see everything. Train tickets add up. But we didn't do high-speed trains and spend a lot of money in that region. It's one of the reasons we love the Kyoto, Osaka area. And there are other parts, if you get outside the main city of Kyoto, that you can save a little bit. but then you're going to spend more time on trains. It just depends how you feel. Next is Antalya, Turkey, one of our absolute favorite places to go from a budget friendly, incredible food, wonderful people, and a beautiful place down on the Mediterranean. We've been there a couple of times. So this is numbers that averaged across 30 days out of all those stays we were there. We were there in 2023, and Antalya then, or Turkey then, was a little less expensive. They've had quite a bit of inflation there. So expect these numbers to be a little higher if you look today, but this is based on what we did 2 years ago. So the budget we set for that was $3,500. Thinking we also in 2023 weren't as careful with our budget. Our total spend for that month was $3,272. So 6% under budget. I would guess you're going to be somewhere towards 36 to 3,800 now. And then there's Da Nang. We put out our videos on Da Nang. Hopefully you've watched them. If not, please find them. They're a really nice deep dive into Da Nang, where we stayed, how much it cost. Very detailed budget breakdown. As I said, you'll notice the numbers are a little different because we were there in this one hotel for 38 nights and then 13 nights in some other places. So we're trying to balance those costs across the whole thing. It would be less if we just stayed in the one hotel, the Crown Plaza there. Da Nang is the number one city for a reason. Absolutely keep it on your list. It's a great place to save money. Hopefully that doesn't change anytime soon because we can't wait to go back. So for Da Nang, we budgeted $3,000 thinking we could really go pretty low here, but we stayed in a very nice hotel. In fact, we consider it to be one of the nicest hotels we've stayed in, and then the best lounge, or one of the 2 or 3 best lounges we've been to. So our spending for that month was $2,580 for 30 days. If I had to guess, or basically I've estimated from our spending, if we stayed all 30 nights just in that hotel, we've been somewhere in the $2,200 range, maybe even $2,000, because we simply didn't have to go out and eat. There was almost no food cost in that hotel. When you add in the other nights that we spent in other apartments, we spent a much more money, but Vietnam is so inexpensive for food, it wasn't that bad. So number 5 on our list was Valencia. Now, we were there in 2023 in the early parts of our travels. So again, we weren't as good on our budget. We stayed in a very nice apartment near the city, walked everywhere. It was really great. If you stay a little outside, you can save some money. So Valencia is pretty much an on-budget location, or it was 2 years ago. We budgeted $4,000. We spent $4,473 there. Now, I'm not really happy about that, but as I said, we weren't really paying as much attention. We were 12% over budget. Almost all of that was food. We just enjoyed really good food in Valencia. We could have eaten so much better or cheaper, but we didn't. We splurged on a lot of really nice meals and pay and everything else. It was also right before our wedding, so we were running around doing a bunch of stuff, and I think there's some costs in there that wouldn't be normal for a month there. On to number 4, Bangkok, Thailand. Incredible city. We were there last year at the end of the year, so it's fresh in our minds. Another great city for value. You can get apartments sub $1,000 for a month pretty easily, sub $600 if you're willing to be a little bit off the river, maybe a little bit up north. Some great areas. I'm not talking Chiang Mai North. I'm just saying outside of the core downtown area. Lots of wonderful neighborhoods. So we budgeted $4,000 because we were staying in a bunch of hotels. We bounced to all sorts of different hotels. Most of them were in that $75 to $80 range when you're talking about using points, the IHC points. Watch our other videos about that. And we ended up coming in at $3,869. So 3% under budget. The food was really inexpensive. The housing was ridiculous. We spent, almost $2,500 on housing when you could spend $1,000 or less. $1,500 would get you an amazing high-rise apartment with all the amenities. So I would say $3,000 is a perfectly fine budget for Bangkok. $2,500 and you can easily live well as a couple. $2,000 would get you living well as a single person. So number 3 is Istanbul, Turkey. Again, back to Turkey. Love the city. Amazing place to go visit. If you stay in the heart of the tourist area, it's much more expensive. There's incredible hotels and luxury places to stay. Not all that ridiculously expensive, but again, that's not where we would probably recommend for a month-long stay. We bounced around to several locations. If you stay over across the river in the Asia side of the town, across the Bosphorus, beautiful neighborhoody feel, lots of cafes and walking streets. So if you stay on the Asia side, you can keep your cost down to, $1,000, $1,200 will get you a very nice apartment. Now, we did budget the full 4,000 because it was 2022 and 2023, and we really didn't know what we were doing. That was just the number we had at the time, and we ended up spending 3,650. So $3,650. That put us 9% under budget. With the inflation, I'd say 4,000 is probably a very, very nice stay there. So number two is Portimao in Portugal. It's in the Algarve on the southern coast. Now, this is a place we visited the area twice as travelers for a month or more than a month each. And then we actually settled there as residents for a year before deciding it wasn't quite the right place for us. So we have spent basically 15 plus months there in total. Love it. It's still on our short list of places we would return to if we decide to settle down anytime soon because it's an amazing place. It's just not the life we want to live right now, having all those fixed costs of an apartment and residency and the restrictions that you have there. We were there in 22, 23, and 24. So this covers a lot of time. I've tried to average the numbers out to give you a perspective on travel there today. Now, if you go in the high season, you're going to spend a lot more on housing and a rental car. If you can come in May, June, you get some beautiful weather. Water's a little chilly, but the water never really warms up. It's the Atlantic Ocean. Or go in late September and October. You usually get nice weather. You get to enjoy the environment. So we had budgeted, of course, the $4,000 because when we first went there, that was all we knew. We just threw out a round number. Now, we spent on average across all of those months $4,200. And that included our full time apartment, which was right in that same price range for that, with all the utilities and everything else, $1,800. So we were, 5% over budget. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great. We could have spent less because we ended up renting cars a lot there. So take that out, but it's an area you kind of need a car if you want to go do stuff. Now, if you stay in Portimao or one of the other main towns along the coast, you don't really need to have a car except for when you want to take day trips and go someplace, or maybe rent it for a couple of days and go see the rest of the coastline, or even all the way to Spain because it's an hour and a half away. Not bad. But again, I think that $4,000 budget's a good target. A little more if you're going in the high season. If you go towards the low season, you can get away with 3,000 to 3,500. And finally, our number one city was Alicante, Spain, close to a lot of other great towns along the coast. It's a wonderful base to see the area. Again, rent a car for a few days and go hit some of those other areas. If you were going to spend a month, and we highly recommend it, we did it in 22 and 23, you can budget, $4,000 there and probably do very well. Prices are increasing. It's a very popular place now, but there's a reason. And it's not nearly as crowded as going to Barcelona, Valencia, Madrid, etc. And it's a big enough city that you can actually enjoy it without feeling overwhelmed. We did budget our $4,000 standard, and we came in at 3,788. So, a couple $100 under budget. I think today 4,000 would be about the right spend. We were a little more careful on food in Alicante than we were in Valencia, so you can see that helps. Now, if you watch the video that we just did about these cities, you'll know that we didn't stop at the top 8 countdown. We added 3 extra bonus cities that we have been to and spent our time in, and feel that while they're not as budget friendly, they are great cities to spend a month. First in our bonus cities was Paris. Now, this was our honeymoon. We splurged. We did set our budget at $5,500. That's how much more expensive Paris is if you're going to try to enjoy it as a honeymoon or a special event, special occasion trip. That's more realistic than trying to fit it in a $4,000 budget, honestly. Now, we stayed in the 17th arrondissement, which is near Montmartre and Sacré-Cœur. Beautiful area, very residential. So our $5,500 budget, we ended up spending $5,889. So we were 7% over budget. Honestly, that was a pretty good deal considering we ate a lot of special meals out. If we'd been traveling at our normal budget travel, 5,000 would have been probably safe. 5,500 would have certainly been very nice. But Paris is not something you want to try to rush through. Too many people do. Number 2 on the list of bonus cities is Greece and the Greek islands. Now, we spent a month in between Athens and bouncing through 4 islands, 4 of the main popular ones nowadays. Again, it is not an inexpensive place to go. The food, though, is very good value. You can eat really well for a very modest price. Shopping, going to the grocery store there is a good value. You can cook in and save a little bit of money, especially breakfast, snacks, lunches, and then go out and enjoy a nice seafood meal, which is why you're in Greece. Plus, you want to go to the sites and the Parthenon and the islands and the ruins and all that stuff while you're there, take boat trips. So it is not a place you want to try to be low budget unless you're just a low budget traveler and you can do that in your lifestyle. We're not that type. We have our $4,000 budget for the Greece, though we did bump it up because we knew we were going to spend some money bouncing between the islands, and we set it at $4,500 and ended up spending $5,292. 18% over budget. That was not a good month. Now, a lot of that was driven by the expense of the ferries. They have jumped up in price. They're now $60 to $90 per person unless you buy way in advance, and we just weren't willing to book ourselves into those tickets too far in advance because we hadn't figured out everywhere we were going and where we're staying until a couple months before we went. So, could you do it under $5,000? Yeah, absolutely. Could you do it under 4,500? Sure, if you stay in one, maybe two spots. But if you want to hit the sites, hit all the highlights, you're going to spend a little bit more. Is it worth it? Yeah, it's still definitely on the bucket list. And finally, our third bonus location, not really a city, it's an island, Madeira. It is an amazing volcanic island. It's Portuguese owned and controlled, so part of Portugal, but it's actually off the coast of Morocco. So it is tropical or subtropical. For hiking, outdoor activities, etc., it is one of the most amazing places to go. Can you spend a month there? We spent 3, and at the end of 3, we were ready to go because it's a small island, but it's definitely a place you can get around. Now, it's a place that kind of needs a car at least several times. So we did rent a car several times. We budgeted $4,500 a month. We thought with the extra car, expenses and all that, and eating really well, we'd do fine. Yeah, we end up at $4,980 average across those 3 months, 11% over budget. I think we overspent because of the high season. If we'd avoided high season, we'd probably have been 4,500 would have been a fine number. 4,500 to 5,000 for a couple traveling in a fairly nice, you want to stay in a nice one bedroom or more apartment, not a little studio. So if we took these 11 months as one trip, just to kind of give you essentially a year budget, 11 months, we had budgeted $45,500. So a little above our $4,000 average, which would have been $44,000. And we, balanced it. We had a few months where we were under budget, a few months kind of right at budget, and several months we were over, a couple we were a lot over. But total was $46,473. So $973 above budget. I consider that to be pretty good. 2.1% over all that. That would be a good year for us. So we've learned a lot over these 3 years. That's why we're trying to share this stuff with you. All done.
I hope you enjoyed the video. Please let us know if you have any comments or any questions.
Or any places that you suggest, because we're always looking for other great locations around the world.
If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe.
Please. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for watching. Bye.